All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Welcome to the April 3rd Thursday Web Forum for the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, or SECAS. I'm Hillary Morris. I work on user support and communications for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint, and we host this web forum on the third Thursday of every month. It's intended as an opportunity to share the latest updates on the blueprint, get input and involvement from folks like y'all, and highlight exciting science and lessons learned from conservation action going on in the Southeast region. So we have the usual agenda for today. You probably recognize this if you come regularly. I'll start by introducing our speaker, who will present for 30 to 40 minutes or so on the monthly topic. We'll have time at the end for Q&A and discussion, and then I'll wrap up by previewing next month's webinar and sharing some updates from SECAS staff. As a heads up, you can probably see that we are recording this web forum. I just do that as an option for the one or two people who inevitably email me afterwards and said, I wanted to come, but I had some sort of conflict. I will post that link to the recording from the events page of the SECAS website within a couple of days. Anyone have any questions or comments before we get started? All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce Mary Kate Brown, who is the Coastal Projects Manager with the Nature Conservancy in Alabama. She's going to be talking about a really ambitious and successful restoration project in Bayou La Batre, Alabama. My colleague Louise Vaughn and I heard about this project at the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center Symposium last fall in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and thought this was just a really amazing project with so many great lessons learned to share more broadly. So we're super happy to have her. And Mary Kate, you can go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Thank you so much, Hillary. Share my screen. Okay, does everyone see my screen?
Yeah, it looks great. I think it's about to go full screen in a minute. Yeah, looks good.
Okay, perfect. I am so excited to talk about the restoration project in Bayou La Batre, and this picture that I'm showing you right now is actually a good kind of snapshot of how the project fits in with the working waterfront in the Bayou La Batre in Alabama, as well as in conservation lands that which extends all from the Bayou La Batre Channel all the way to the Mississippi-Alabama border, where we have the Grand Bay National Wildlife Refuge and the National Estuarine Research Reserve. And also this project, when it's kind of co-managed by mostly the GNC as well as our engineers, Moffitt and Nickel. So to give a geographic representation of where lightning is, we are down in the southwest corner of Alabama, down right on the waterfront of Mississippi Sound, and you will see Dolphin Island, which is down in the bottom of the map. So this area is actually in the trajectory of a lot of hurricanes that come through that make landfall in Mississippi and Louisiana, but also the east side of Alabama. So it has been succumbed to a lot of hurricanes and coastal storms over the last 100 years. And if you look at the shoreline change map, you can see that we actually have the red line from 1916, that some of the areas along this community water feet of shoreline 100 years or so. And so for us to, this vital restoration project is really important in kind of adding in that buffer and protect the working waterfront of Bayou La Batre, which is a bustling community for shipbuilding and seafood processing and multiple generations of fishing families that are shrimpers, crabbers, oystermen, and just really a way of life that a lot of people have lived here for multiple generations. In fact, our mayor is actually a 6th generation government official for the town of Bayou La Batre. So there's a lot of history within this community, and it's really important for us to protect this heritage. So when we started this project, it's with a 2-phase approach with National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We started with phase 1, which was acquiring an engineer to do design and engineering. And then the second phase was actually the construction and post-construction monitoring after that. So this is where we started. This was the shoreline that we had to work with. And we want to kind of rebuild out. These are artist renderings from the Monaco when we started this project and everything. And talk about today is how do we get from the beginning, the conceptual, to reality. And this is actually an aerial photograph taken by one of our partners, Sam St. John, who is actually one of our partners that take coastal photos all across the coastal Alabama and Mississippi, sometimes Louisiana and over into Florida. And they actually gave a really good view to the public of like projects that are happening, and realize that this project, Lightning Point, this is 2 years after we finished construction, July 2020, and it has all the features, and it really shows sometimes when we're standing there face to face up on the edge of that, right along this ridge right here, we can't see how big this is, or we don't have access to see all the little plants that are growing along the tidal creek. So this is what we're looking at. We're trying to see how the site has greened up over time. But these type of projects can happen. And so talk more about how do you make these happen? What are some steps that you can help make, and how do they get the community? So one of the key things in restoration is making sure you know who owns the land, and especially like how to own the land. So TNC acquired about 127 acres of land were acquired, and one is outlined on the wide called the True World Food Tract, which we bought and then we transferred over to the Alabama Forever Wildland Trust, which is a conservation program that is paid by oil and gas royalties, and where landowners can voluntarily sell their land to Forever Wild and contribute to the conservation land entirety within the state of Alabama. And Mobile County was able to acquire this blue piece right here through a CIAP program, Coastal Impact Assistance Program, before the project started in 2016. And then all the green parcels here are owned by TNC, which will be later transferred to Bayou La Batre. As you can see how the project has been built here, but we have yet to build the 4 breakwaters here. And that is because we did not own these 2 little parcels here with waterfront. We just acquired those in the last year or so. So we will be finishing building those breakwaters. It makes a lot simpler to have the landowner, the land, waterfront lands owned by TNC or a state entity or a municipality rather than private land, because sometimes landowner agreements get a little more efficient for us to hold the land or find a public entity to hold the land. So once we held the land, then we want to understand what is the big picture. What are we looking for this piece of waterfront property? What are we missing? Is there something habitat value that is missing in Mississippi? And so once we hired the right engineer through a bid process, which we acquired Moffitt & Nichols Services, we held a charrette and we gathered everybody around a table. A charrette is basically a meeting where you have everyone brainstorm or just kind of blab out, what do I want for this piece of property? What do I want to see in my restoration project? What's missing? What haven't I seen in other restoration projects? Or what is my community? We had to add it on the table and draw things. And then the engineers would take that and feed it into what they needed to find in their field investigation, geotechnical, what type of sediment do we need, or what is there now, what type of cultural resources. There's actually an adjacent old oyster cannery factory from the late 1800s that was used in Bayou La Batre and was actually probably the site of the child labor law establishment. And the type of natural resources, are there some missing, what used to be there but it's not there, how can we restore that, and then the whole hydrodynamic and geographic profile of that shoreline. All that engineer do more than modeling, and our engineers were very thorough in understanding the dynamics of the site, and so they took in every little aspect, detail with breakwater dimension, configuration, making sure that the breakwaters are able to break down the wave energy that's coming from the South Seas in a hurricane type environment. How wide do we need to make the breakwaters, the gaps, and also incorporating sea level rise. So when we're designing these type of project, we want to make sure they're sustainable, not just for 5-10 years. If we've seen in a lot of our past restoration projects, living shoreline, that some of the living shoreline projects tend to break down after 5 to 10 years. So we want to make sure that we have something a little bit more robust, but not so rigid, but enough to be able to sustainable and add habitat value. So we're looking at 20 to 25 years of design life. And then also the dredge material. Do you have the right material? That's always a touchy subject. And you have to work with engineers. That's the thing about the environmental. What are species of interest that we're looking for? So through this project, we were able to contract with Dauphin Island Sea Lab and University of Alabama at Birmingham to look at the diamondback terrapins and also all the different bird species in the surrounding water body in Mississippi Sound, because that's always been we're in the pathway of a lot of the migratory species. And then also ecosystem services. Are there some services that are not there that we can boost up? And we use Martin and Nick use the count values from NERDA assessment and apply that to our project. At the same time, this is a community waterfront, so we need to make sure that we have that connection of the community with the restoration project and improving the amenities around that area. And the last thing is, how much is this going to cost? That's what everybody wants to know about these types of restoration. Are we able to afford this? Is this feasible? Finding ways to be cost effective, but still serve the general purpose of the restoration project. So when we have all these things working in the rooms and modeling computer and everybody's coming to design, we need to also remember what is the mission of this project. And having a mission statement, this was something that we wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And when you have the right engineers and the right stakeholders and able to compromise and take everybody's opinions and perspective of what they envision for a successful restoration project, we need to make sure that everybody agrees on the same mission statement. So this is one that we worked on with the mayor, the member county, and the stakeholders, as well as the engineers, and understanding that we're revitalizing the locally important waterfront area lighting point. And we're enhancing and protecting, but we're also improving community assets. And I always call this like the gateway to the value, because it is. It's the gateway to the working waterfront, the gateway to their community. So we really what we're doing is we're trying to improve their community front porch and provide an enhanced experience for them to be proud of, and proud of their heritage, proud of where they live, but also be able to enjoy it at the same time and kind of be connected back to nature. It's like establishes the reason why they live there. And then we also want a resilient, productive shoreline so that they can live there for a long time. And as well as I mentioned before, the enhanced accessibility, let them have fun, enjoying and walking up to the edge of the shoreline so they can see this beautiful environment and appreciate the waterfront that they have right in their own community. So through all the modeling, sometimes people don't understand like how do breakwaters work, what are we looking for? And these two figures right here kind of show you all the different modeling that the engineers, Martin and Nickel, took in. And the one on the right shows the wave height. So our goal with the automatic water restoration, we're trying to break the wave height down at least half of when it approaches shore. You break down the wave energy, you are slowing the amount of erosion that happens along that shoreline. So right here we have the breakwater configuration. And before the wave line, the breakwater is about 2.5 to 3 feet in height. But then after they hit the breakwater, they chop down to about 1.5 foot. So that is a drastic drop in wave height, and actually it will make the shoreline more resilient over time. And then over here, we have what is the wave length. When you have more breath wave length, a breath wave action with like choppy action, it kind of causes a really active wave action, and you don't have the shoreline not able to keep up with all that choppiness of wave. But when the breakwaters kind of break that cycle of the wave length and slows it down a little bit, the shoreline is able to absorb a lot of that action before it approaches the shoreline. So those are the two things that we really want to, understanding like how far do we need to put the breakwater? It's a little bit further or closer, and that takes into account of how expensive this project's going to be. Laughing, this one gets a little bit more technical, but everybody thinks about what type of scenario do we want our break restoration project to perform in? Do we want to just like everyday scenario, which is usually about the operational 50%, or do we want the really extreme Hurricane Katrina category 4, which is extreme 25 years? And this was something that we talked about back and forth. It's not just a breakwater project itself. It's a breakwater project with marsh habitats. So we need to make sure that we have a breakwater project that will also break down wave energy, but also break down enough wave energy so that it doesn't affect or damage the newly established marsh habitat. So we decided on a balance between operational extremes. So it is effective with operational on an everyday basis, but at the same time, it can still perform successfully with hurricane activity. And with this, we use a marsh erosion threshold, basically that a marsh habitat can only succeed with breaking down wave energy when it's approximately a half foot. So we want to make sure that we can get the wave height down below a half foot. And right here, you see in the yellow, we have 0.4 and 0.3. So we decided to construct our breakwater height at 3.5 feet above sea level. And so that's where we above water level. And so that's what we have established profile. The base width is about 30 feet, and the crest width is about 10 feet. And I'll explain a little bit more about the proposed modification. So that is how our breakwater looks like in the water, where we have the wave height coming through, it breaks over the waves, and then we're able to drop down the wave height over to 0.4 feet. At the same time, we talked about different types of reef materials and what we want to and what's the best to hold in sediment. We did reach out for a call for different types of attenuation units and all the devices. Decided to use because what happens is sea level rises. So how are we going to accommodate that? And with using rock or rubble and riprap, we know that we can always top off in the next 10, 15 years, or able to repair it through hurricanes or extreme situations, or if we have a drastic increase in sea level rise, we can always go back and adjust the height of the breakwater to abate that change in the future. So in the end, we are able to come up with this design of a restoration project after we acquire the acres with support of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and then after we submitted this to the Army Corps of Engineers, we actually worked with 6 different branches of the Army Corps of Engineers, all the way from the regulatory to planning and environment, away with anything related to federal navigation, as this project is on a federal navigation channel maintained. Also with operations, who do all the dredging work in this area, and the general counsel and legal, because it turned out this parcel right here was under an easement for dredge spoil. It was an old dredge spoil used from the 1950s to 1980s, but we went back to the Army Corps saying, can we release that easement so that we can rehabilitate this site and use the sediment to build out this West Marsh area? So when we finally got our final permit, we submitted a permit application in 2017, towards the end of 2017, and then we finally got our permit application approved in April 2019. So it's about 18-month turnaround time for this complex project. But we are able to construct 1.5 miles of breakwater with 40 acres of marsh creation using over 240,000 cubic yards of beneficial use sediment, one from this offshore area and one from this upland area. So this offshore borough area has not been touched a lot at all. So we had a lot of clean sand, and we used that to build this 35-acre site over here. And then the Westmark creation was used to build this. We were able to also create 2 miles of tidal creeks all throughout this site. And in addition to all the creation of the coastal habitats, we also wanted to improve the amenity of the existing parking lot, which is actually a dirt parking lot, but make it a low impact parking lot using green infrastructure techniques, and then add in trails and pavilion and fishing platform, which get that connection with the community with the restoration project. So just to kind of recap the we have short breakwaters and the 2 jetties. When we talk about jetties, we can talk about jetties. This was one thing when throughout the whole project, and the ADM, is be upfront, be transparent. Don't try to change terminology of what you're going for. Be upfront. I think some regulatory agencies appreciate people who propose the permit application be like honest about what you're proposing, because getting a straight answer from them in the beginning will also kind of help your project and expedite it a little bit. You can figure out all the little hurdles so you're not dealing with those hurdles in the beginning. And communication is really important, making sure that agencies understand the main purpose of what you're trying to build and what you're trying to achieve, because sometimes they can help you say, oh, well, you say then this will help us understand it. And even getting them out there to visit is also helpful as well. We have habitat creation, all this area behind the breakwater. We have the public assets area right up here on the upland. And then also the 2 areas of beneficial use of dredge material. So as I said, we received our permit in April 2019. We put out the bid for a contractor, and we hired our contractor end of August 19th, and we were able to kick off in September 2019. Construction officially started towards the beginning of October 2019, when they were able to mobilize and acquire all the material. We are fortunate to hire a local contractor called Crowder Gulf out of Theodore, Alabama, who utilized a marine contractor who acquired the rock. His rock yard was just a mile north of where Lightning Point was. So the timing, the build facilities, the staging of everything was really kind of simplistic for us and actually worked to our advantage. So the contractor also employed a dredging contractor from Louisiana, Magnolia Dredge and Dock, who were very experienced in understanding how do we do things simultaneously to cut off this time of a year-long construction period. So we gave them a year to construct this project, but they were able to finish it within 10 months. So a lot of tactics that they used and their past experience was really helpful in us making this a successful. And making sure you acquire a contractor who understands that you're not just building a project and leaving. You're going to be communicating with the public. We have had multiple people come up to the site and love watching the marsh buggies moving the dirt around, watching the dredge pump out, and making sure they know that they need to talk to the public and not just walk away. And, make them feel accepted, get them to understand, and kind of, nix any rumors that start. And so these are some few snapshots that I have of the construction. I have much more than this, but you can always email me if you want pictured, but there's too many to show in the presentation. View of like how we set up the dredging of all the cubic yards of sediment. So as the contractors were building the breakwaters starting from east to west, they were also building these little dikes in between the marsh area. So we call this the East Marsh area, and then I have a couple of slides showing the West Marsh area across the channel. So the East Marsh area is about 35 acres, and we started with this area right here where we pumped in all the sediment from the offshore borough area. You can see a lot of this, and turbidity, don't worry. We had multiple monitors out there, engineering inspector on site checking water quality. We had other background monitors on a piling water quality monitoring setup that took monitoring 24/7, and that was really helpful in a lot of the cases where we would run into some rumors of our project causing harm to adjacent oyster farm. What this site, we learned from past projects that sometimes it's better to use the super sacks, which are big bags full of clean sand, and they come pre-bagged. And we use that as a dike to protect this historical resource here, which was the oyster cannery. And along this edge, after they were done with pumping and dredging and filling, they would cut open these bags, and it would create like a nice clean beach. And it's a great habitat for roosting and the birds, all the different critters that really like the kind of shallow area. So it added, even though we had to cut out an area for marsh creation, it actually added an extra little feature to the way. So each of these cells are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. What would happen is they would infiltrate deep water into phase 3, and before they emptied into the open water. This was one way that we controlled this, the sedimentation and turbidity into the local waterway. And then toward the end of June, we just finished filling in this phase right here before we started carving Tidal Creek. You can see that this phase 3, it's just about full. We're still pumping in a little bit sediment here and there. But after they finished moving all the sediment into shrubs and the tidal creeks and connecting the lagoon, we were also able to reconnect this old tidal creek here, and after probably more than 50 years, full of stagnant species of scarabus and really brackish water, standing water, very hard to walk through. But once we opened this up, after maybe 1 year of monitoring, we started seeing the return of coastal native species such as Spartina, alterniflora, smooth cordgrass, and Juncus vomeranius in there. So we know that there's adequate tidal flow coming in there and cleaning it out, slowly restoring it back to its historical origins of the coastal marsh. And then on the west side, we have this ugly 10-acre site. This was old area, and this was probably the most expensive area to restore. Basically, this was a 10-acre upland disposal site from 1950 to 1980. And this was one that we really we need to fix it. We need to kind of clean it up, get it back to what can look like Grand Bay Savannah over here with this beautiful Juncus marsh. There's a whole berm over there. But part of this was how do we do this in a cost-effective way? And so what we decided to do was that instead of mowing down the whole entire site, we just focused on where do we need to carve out the creek so that we have enough sediment to build out the west marsh creation. So they would mow everything around the path of the tidal creek. Then they would take in a ladder dredge and start carving out the sediment in and out of these creeks really deep, it's about 4 to 6 feet. And they would take it and pump it out to this west marsh creation area. And actually, we call this the racetrack because you can take a full circle, go all the way around. It's actually provided a really cool habitat because I was in there last September, and someone said they found a family of 5 manatees in these creeks. So having those little aspects of adding back an environment for all the creatures that visit this area is really important to us. And this is where we ended up within June 2020, and you can see it actually connects with another restoration project at GCNR in Boulder called Little Bay, where they rebuilt this after 2 big hurricanes. I think it was Katrina, where this peninsula was kind of in half and lost, so they actually built this back in. So it was important for us to have a complementary restoration project that tied in with the existing landscape. And this is where we finished up in July 2020. Well, we thought we were done, and we got a little bit nervous. I think Tropical Storm Cristobal came through just 2 days after we planted one of the phases of the tidal in the Eastern Marsh, and 2 days later we get Cristobal come through with a 4.1 storm surge, and it survived. I was like, okay, good. But then with Sally came through, we got a little bit nervous. Delta came through and they hit us. But a lot of times we try to, capture what is happening at these sites, what is happening to the restoration project. And I did put a game camera at each of those different storms, but each of those storms came May kind of, the storm surge came at 9. So I got really good footage until we had a named storm with Hurricane Ida. Came in August, end of August, 8/29. And we actually had storm surge. You can see at the top right chart, I have a little chart showing the tip of one storm surge that came in the middle of the day, and then another one that came in the next day. And I love showing this video because every 30 minutes, I started maybe a day before the storm was going to make landfall, or a couple days, because you never know how fast the storm comes through, and just kind of trim it down to so you can see what happens, how the water rises in, and then out. So you can agree on the breakwater. But the site stands at the should, the grass is still there. There's always a little standing water. One of the reasons we want to make sure that we didn't really plant everything because we wanted the sediment to kind of move around, the Mother Nature to move around the sediment. But we're really excited that it was able to survive through 5 named storms. Sometimes I've talked a little bit about the benefits, but the really key project benefits for this project is that we're providing a buffer from waves and boatways. We have the jetties to maintain the navigation channel for all types of vessels, with shipbuilding, dredging vessels, seafood vessels, fishing vessels, any recreational boat. And then we also have all the habitats that support a wide range of fish, shellfish, and birds. And having them all work together is in a synonymous way, like, it's really exciting to see, because we know that it provides the first line of defense for the community and their economy. Then also, sometimes people don't think about how these habitats are also help improve water quality. When you have that added buffer, all that storm surge that comes off from the upland and runs off the road, we're able to filter a lot of those pollutants before it re-enters back in Mississippi Sound. We have community use. And then the last thing I forgot to mention was the reduced maintenance cost for the Army Corps dredging team. So the navigation channel of Bayou La Batre would dredge almost 1 to 2 years because it would get a lot of constant sedimentation. Now that we have the jetties and the Lightning Point project in place, we're able to control or slow down that sedimentation. So now maybe they don't have to dredge every 2 years. Maybe it'll be 3 to 4 years, and expand that, save that money, and then they can put it to other projects. What I get into now is that, well, where could they put that money, or how are you going to sustain this project? And so that's where we need to maintain those relationships with Army Corps, is that maybe this site could be a potential location of thin layer placement. Maybe in the next 10, 15 years, we see our marsh platform is dropping a little bit. We need to go back out there, or we had a really bad hurricane came through and scoured out we lost a whole bunch of sediment that washed back out into Mississippi Sound. So we can work with the Army Corps saying, if they're about to dredge the channel, hey, can you put some sediment on our Lightning Point site? So that's one way we're looking for adaptive management. And the other one I mentioned earlier was the addressing the sea level rise, is to adjust the breakwater modification by adding another extra layer, or maybe change the orientation. Those are things that you have to think about. It's like, how are you going to protect your investment? So this is about a $12 million construction project. Sure that you put much money in, you need to kind of just address a lot of uncertainty. So we're really thankful for Muffin and Nickel to work with to think about what are the differences that we need to go through to address adaptive management strategy in the future. And then also, protecting our investment, we're also protecting future investments. Bayou La Batre is now working with Mobile County and the Restore Council to pump in more money into their community, but also really revamp their boat basin that's just been kind of not run down, but damaged by Hurricane Katrina, and then had a lot of activity after the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. They've never really had time to spend time to, improve that whole public assets area. So Bayou La Batre is one of few boat ramps in Southwest Mobile County. They have this one, then they have to drive another 20 minutes or so to another boat ramp, smaller one, and then the next one is Dolphin Island, all the way down to about 30 minutes away. So having a really nice, accessible boat ramp area where they can get fuel and sell their seafood or have get-togethers and interact with other vessel owners. It's really important. So this project is happening soon, in the next year or so. It's about a little over $20 million in construction for this, but it will add in an extra economic layer involvement for the community. But it's important that we have an environmental restoration project that can protect that investment as well. And I've probably mentioned multiple times that having the right partner, it's really critical. These are all the partners. There's more than 20 people here, and I have list everybody. Without any one of these people, this project would not have been successful. From our funders, NIFWIP, to our partners, the agencies, the state, the regulatory, our mobility program developed a watershed management plan that went into promoting this project. All of our contractors to help construct the project, monitor the project. We also worked with a local high school. We are still working on this project. So because the lands that GNC owns now will be transferred over to the city of Bayou La Batre, and we will be having a conservation easement on that. So we're working with Georgia, Alabama Land Trust, and then all the other smaller organizations we work with, even though there's other relationships that people don't think about are corporate people who want to help volunteers. So we had them help us finish some of the activities, such as boundary posting or cleanup or, invasive species removal. And I love showing this infographic because it does show a lot of other facets of the project that a lot of people don't think about. And for resiliency, we're thinking about, wow, you add an extra, you sustained 8 feet of storm, 1.5-year kind of storm. Or connecting with the restaurants. We used over 650 cubic yards of recycled oyster shell to build better bird habitat, as well as promote diamondback terrapins. We worked with University of Alabama. We also worked with a local high school student to understand collecting seeds, growing in their greenhouses, then go back out and plant it. So all this really ties into a really successful project. I know I didn't catch everything, but I am available by email, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary Kate. For today, we're going to ask folks to please put questions into the chat to make that a little bit easier to follow. I will also read them aloud for the benefit of the recording. I do see that we have one question already from Joe Hurd. How long did your permitting process take, and what were the key hurdles that you had to overcome during the permitting process? I think you talked a little bit about that, but maybe you could kind of recap and expand.
Sure. So once we acquired the engineer in fall of 2017, we had our first pre-app meeting in early 2018. So, and we submitted our application with in March 2018. So probably a year after we received our permit, I think we kind of skipped a lot of the hurdles with a lot of the permitting by having everybody in the same room. We did have everybody in the same room, and right in the beginning when we were doing the pre-app meeting, it's really important for us, and I think it kind of expedited the permit process. We did have some, I think we could have gotten our permit a little bit faster. There was a change in one of the permitting managers took a new position, and we were hoping that she would finish that position, our permit application, before she moved. And so we had a lull of 2 months. Cultural resources is probably one of the biggest hurdles that I think a lot of people have when they go through permitting a restoration project. That is still a struggle with today, because there are, I don't think a lot of people understand the connection that we're not harming the cultural resources. We're trying to protect them. And that sometimes does not get portrayed through the communication when we submit a permit application. And the last thing was, when we do these permitting designs and everything, one thing that I think was really a special factor about this is that we actually had a marine contractors meeting before we finalize our design, saying what is the construction feasibility of this project? How long is this going to take? And that was really something that I've shared with a lot of other people when they do large restoration projects, because you don't think about, like, we design and design, you can design it as much as you want to, but is it feasible? Is this project going to be feasible for construction? Is it going to be too expensive? And so that also kind of helped with a lot of our permitting. But we were, I think, being upfront and being transparent and maintaining that relationship with Army Corps was really critical to kind of avoid a lot of the permitting hurdles that most people experience.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Louise in the chat. What is the current relationship with the local community like? Have you noticed a change in attitude or interest in nature-based solutions or climate change or topics like that?
Thank you, Louise. So we've started this project in 2016, and the last 6 years or so, they were very skeptical about working with us. You know, they're very traditional. We worked with 4 different projects to the beginning and currently now. And the current mayor right now was on the city council for all through those mayors. So she's seen, and he still tells me, like, I was not sure about y'all. You know, I didn't know how you're going to make this happen. But I think us being vocal and showing up at city council meetings and hearing them and making sure that they, you know, we're trying to help you. We want you. We value your feedback. And right now, it's a solid relationship. We were actually able to acquire another grant through the EPA Gulf of Mexico program. We're actually doing the stormwater mapping of the whole watershed that actually empties into this canal, and that we just started an engineer, and they're actually field mapping all the different stormwater infrastructure, and we're actually helping the city, and I think they've kind of put a lot of trust in us. With regard to change in attitude and interest in nature-based solutions, I think we're getting there. I think they've been so used to so many hurricanes that that's the norm for them. We had another project that we just working on right now through the National Academy of Sciences, working with a stretch of probably about 40 landowners on Shawbuck Road, and they are really in the forefront. And we were trying to gauge their perspectives on nature-based solutions. So we worked with University of South Alabama and Mississippi State University and understand, are you interested? What do you envision for it? Do you want nature-based solutions? We're not trying to push anything on them, but want to get them to understand that there are potential solutions out there. But I think now people are not scared of us, and they know that we're not trying to force something on their property. We value their feedback. And so I think right now is something that they've come back to us and asked us for help, like, hey, can you help us with this project? Can you work with us? And they know that we're there to support them every step of the way.
That's great how y'all have been able to build that trust with the community. Are there any other questions? We probably have time for 1 or 2 more. You can just drop those in the chat. I'll pause to see if anyone has any additional questions they'd like to ask. All right, I'm not hearing any, so I'm going to wrap up with some updates from SECAS staff and a quick preview of next month's web forum. And then we can pause again at the end to see if you have any other questions that occur to you in the meantime. Feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll circle back to those at the end. Thanks again for that presentation. Let me just share my screen again. So next month, we're going to have kind of a special third Thursday web forum. We have allocated our usual webinar slot to one of our Blueprint workshops to review the draft of Southeast Blueprint 2023. We're specifically going to be looking at the draft priorities within Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So this web forum will last an hour and a half instead of just our usual hour, so that we have a little bit more time to dig into the review of the blueprint. And we're going to host it via Zoom instead of via Teams, so that we can have advanced registration for our workshops. So if you would like to come to this webinar and participate in the workshop, Let me drop a link to our workshop page in the chat. And that's where you can get the links to our whole series of workshops. We'll have 8 of them across the last 2 weeks of May, and you can register for whichever one that you're interested in. If you haven't been to one of our workshops before, this is a key part of how we get input on the blueprint to drive our regular revision cycle. So we'll be really looking at using a spatially explicit tool, digging into what looks good, what looks over prioritized, what looks under prioritized, what do you have questions about, and you can really provide that specific feedback on where you have feedback on the blueprint. Then let's see, I also just wanted to plug again, in addition to this workshop specific to Puerto Rico and USVI, that'll be in our next workshop. Here's the full suite of other workshops that we're hosting. So definitely register there on the workshop page if you'd like to participate. And that's really all I have. I like to end on this slide of how to get more involved in SECAS. You can register for our newsletter on the footer of any page of the SECAS website. That'll get you signed up for our monthly newsletter, as well as a reminder email about this Third Thursday Web Forum series. You can find contact information for staff on the website as well. And of course, we'd love for you to check out the Southeast Conservation Blueprint and let us know how it's working for you. I'm going to check the chat again. It does look like we have a question from Roxalana. How far is urban development from the restoration site, and what is the elevation of the land? Do they experience sea level rise, tidal flooding in the city?
Yeah, thank you so much, Roxalana. Yeah, so actually the city facilities are located right on the edge of the canal, all the way up. So it's probably about a mile from the restoration site. And then as you look at some of the aerial where I've shown that you can see the working waterfront. So there are a little bit of urban footprint, but the elevation of the land, it's probably like 10 feet. I mean, it's very, very low. I mean, it's like, I had the last picture of that slide that I was showing, which was where you see the rock and looking over. That is actually only like 10 feet high. And that new rock was placed after Hurricane Zeta because we had an 8-foot storm surge, and then we probably had 3-foot waves over top of that. And what happened was that we actually had a revetment that kind of tied in with the low marsh up to the upland conservation site. And it was really important for us to protect our conservation investment and also our restoration project. But what happened was at the top of that revetment, there was a concrete interaction with the dirt, and it wasn't a very abrupt transition. So what happened when we had all this wave action, it's carved out and scoured out a lot of the dirt and run down. So we added rock all along the edge of the top to kind of filtrate a lot of the stormwater runoff. But right now, the facility is probably, they say, when they get a 6-foot storm surge, their city building is only like 6 inches above the water level. So they do experience subtidal flooding inside, and the condition, the type of storm. So it is one area of one of those low-lying coastal communities, which is another reason why we need to try to promote these restoration projects along Gulf of Mexico. But it's not, there's more than one of these types of communities along the Gulf of Mexico. And so I think it's really important for us to not forget about these communities. And that's why I'm really excited about this, and I always share lessons learned from this.
That was a great question. Thanks. There's one more that's come in from Zach. For the restoration project, what was the process for eliciting species expert opinions about the various species that would be impacted by the project? And was there any conflict among species experts?
Great question, Zach. That's probably the first time I've been asked a question. We use Dolphin Island Sea Lab is really the academic center of excellence, and I've already been monitoring in that area. So with them, they were just kind of really just taking an inventory of the birds within the area and the vicinity. And then the other one was the Dr. Thane Wibbles with University of Alabama at Birmingham, who is a terrapin expert. And he's been mapping and tracking all the terrapins. And he was trying to give us feedback on figuring out how to build additional similar type habitat that had been lost in Mississippi Sound, that's been succumbed to a lot of hurricane and coastal storms. We did not have any conflict among species experts. I think the main thing that we had difficulty with justifying to NIFWIP that, protection of these species is really important. I wanted to continue monitoring after the project was constructed because I think that's an extra added layer of habitat value to Mississippi Sound. And one other thing is that we actually acquired USDA, the Wildlife Health Plan Inspection Invasive Species Unit, and basically they help with predator control. And Lightning Point was actually, I think after so many years, probably 30 years or so, we had our first nesting of Wilson's plover, who, like an active nesting. Well, they nested, they laid eggs, and sure enough, our partners, Alabama Audubon, came back and was surveying the site, and they found that we had a fox predated on that side. So that's one of the things I'm working on right now, is to find funding to help protect the species that nest on these sites. But we're fortunate to have really good support from all of our biologists. Everybody wanted to be involved in this project. So I wish we could have done more monitoring for that.
Thanks. That was another great question, Zach. Any other questions before we call it? I've said everything I need to say, so we can stay another 7 minutes if you want. Lots of love for this presentation in the chat. Yeah, Louise and I were just so blown away when we saw this. I could not imagine what it must have been like watching your $12 million multi-year labor of love in the path of all of these storms. My heart was just in my throat thinking about it.
It was. We actually, I don't know if anybody saw in the first slide, we had the two casino boats. They're owned by the same person. I guess they're the two biggest in the US, and they're still docked there. But in one of the hurricanes, they actually came dislodged, and I was worried about them getting loose and coming rolling over and destroying our restoration project. But thankfully, we had some good people, our mayor called the owner to call upon. It's you better tie up those casino boats right now before they cause any damage. And so I think that's with about a small community that people will talk and everything. And so we love this place. We actually brought a whole group of Region 4 federal representatives to the site. We brought the Restore Council down here. The Weather Channel's been out there. I actually have a story on U.S. Nature for Climate, talking about, I think the next step for this project is talking about carbon storage. How is this site sequestering carbon? And that's something that we haven't tapped into yet. And also ecosystem services valuation. What happens in the next 5 years? So there's a lot of more next steps for this. I think for thin layer placement, but talking with the Corps, how can I permit this site for thin layer placement? So there's more to grow. I think, it's still a baby, but I'm waiting to see Lightning Point grow and see how it grows over the next 10 years or so.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to have you back in 5 or 10 years and see how things have been going in the meantime. Thanks again.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mary Kate before we cut things off? All right, not hearing any. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day and your weekends. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope to see you at a Blueprint workshop in May. And thanks again, Mary Kate. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.